They actually thought they could bleed me dry over the sound of a rooster and a chipped kitchen counter by slapping a $500 fine on my land because the natural noises of living were somehow offensive to their manicured little paradise. And you know what the worst part was? They believed it. I mean, really believed it. Like truth had been outsourced to a HOA board and sold back to them in monthly installments. So I did what any sensible, mildly stubborn person would do. I took their clubhouse. I dropped concrete barriers across their newly paved parking lot in the dead of night, and I watched with a cup of black coffee as their smiling little tyrant got shoved into the back of a county cruiser, her expensive suit bunching under the hands of the law. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Elias Thorne. I'm a third-generation cattleman on 50 acres just outside of Beausejour, Montana, where the Rockies ease into open-breathing valleys and the wind sounds like it remembers everything. My grandfather bought this place back in 1968 with his military pension and two good hands, and every morning of my life, I wake to the rusty chime of wind catchers on the porch, to the sweet, dusty smell of alfalfa and worn saddle leather, to the damp earth around the barn he built. This isn't a property on a spreadsheet. It's the family. It's where Maya and Leo learned how to dig a post hole, how to calm a spooked mare, how responsibility sits quiet on your shoulders. After my divorce last winter, this ranch became the only anchor I had left. The only honest beat in a world that wants to pave and laminate every feeling into something glossy and dead. But development crept in like ivy, and a subdivision bloomed up next door, Oak Creek Crossing. Suddenly there were these identical overpriced houses, chemically perfect lawns, covenants so tight you could choke on them, and residents who treated the smell of cattle like a personal attack. Then came Eleanor Vance, self-appointed president of the HOA, retired corporate litigator transplanted from some concrete city. She drove a pristine white SUV, smelled like heavy floral perfume, and carried her law degree like a loaded pistol. She spoke in that breathy, practiced tone whenever she had to lie. You could feel the smile stop halfway to her eyes, and she'd patrol the neighborhood in a way that said control was a hobby and a mission. At first it was small, a brightly colored violation notice zip-tied to my rusted gate claiming livestock odor complaints, calling my grandfather's century-old barn an unapproved structure, fining me for animals making noise. Then came Eleanor's SUV, parked a little too close to the fence. The tinted window cracked a hair so she could take photos, the heels clicking down the road like a metronome. Certified letters piled up in my mailbox, $500 a day daily, threatening liens on land that belonged to my family for decades. Arthur, the weary postman, handed them to me with a look that said he felt stupid even delivering that kind of cruelty. Money hurt, sure, but the real poison was social. Maya and Leo stopped getting invited to neighborhood bonfires. Old friends avoided my aisle in the grocery store. Eyes slid away in small-town silence. Eleanor and her crew weren't just trying to bankrupt me. They were trying to make me disappear from the social map to make my family invisible. It's a surgical kind of cruelty, and it cuts different than a bill. Then luck, chaotic, crooked luck, smiled on me. Arthur misdelivered a packet meant for someone else. It ended up in my rusted mailbox. Inside were emails between Eleanor and a big development firm, all corporate jargon and timelines. They weren't fighting over noise or aesthetics. They had a plan: force me into foreclosure, rezone my 50 acres for commercial development, hand that land to investors, and split the profits. The notes were cold, clinical, and the names of a few board members were there too, like a shopping list. I felt like someone had shoved me. They thought I was some easy shaken guy. They didn't know what a Montana cattleman does best. He digs his heels in and fights when predators come too close. So I went to the county courthouse and buried myself in dusty, fluorescent-lit records. I flipped through yellowing plats and original incorporation minutes until my fingers cramped. And in a faded 1968 land survey, I found the smoking gun, the clubhouse, the pool, the parking lot sitting on 2/3 of land that was legally mine. My grandfather had given them a revocable easement, permission to use, not permission to own. They'd paved their playground on my dirt. I called Caleb, an old college buddy who now ran the most reputable commercial surveying outfit in the valley. By dawn, his crew was out in the cold, pounding bright orange property pins into frozen ground pin by pin, confirming what the brittle ink had promised. Under Montana law, Adverse possession was a non-starter when permission had been granted, so their claim collapsed like a house of cards. It felt like finding a loaded gun you'd forgotten you had. I could do damage, but I had to be smart. So I hired Clara Higgins, a sharp property lawyer whose office smelled of lemon polish and old leather. She spread the maps on her desk and smiled like a shark that's had a long fast. "Let them continue spending money on your parking lot," she said. "Let them grade paved landscape. Every dollar they throw in makes the case sweeter. We built a quiet plan. We let them waste their cash." Meanwhile, my porch became a war room. Longtime locals, the folks who had lived here before the shiny houses, began sneaking over at night with boxes of old paperwork and stories. Frank, a retired Marine, brought a scowl and a thermos of coffee. Martha from the records office had file folders that smelled like dust and truth. Hank, the electrician, brought his hands in the kind of quiet rage common to people who've been stepped on. We worked over steaming mugs, mapping timelines, connecting dots. They'd been using phantom fines, selective enforcement, and whisper campaigns to evict anyone who didn't match their image of acceptable. Eleanor doubled down. She called a closed-door emergency meeting to propose a special assessment to fund legal action against me, started anonymous rumors about my sanity, and even made fake reports to the state agricultural department claiming I had an outbreak. Dr. Harrison, a seasoned state vet, trudged through my mud, checked my herd, and left, shaking his head. Healthy animals, no sign of disease. But the campaign grew. The county inspector showed up. The fire marshal came out, and a thick envelope arrived from a developer filing suit for nearly $47,000 in fake fines, threatening foreclosure. When Big Jim from the feed store pulled me aside to show an anonymous typed letter demanding he cut off my supplies, I knew they'd turned to strangulation. Then one night someone cut the heavy steel gates. The herd wandered onto the subdivision golf course, tearing up expensive turf. Eleanor paraded a news crew like a queen of outrage. What she didn't know was that our hidden infrared cameras had filmed Tyler Vance, her nephew, using bolt cutters in the fog. They'd staged destruction to make me look negligent. The absolute breaking point, though, came on a foggy Wednesday morning when helicopters thundered overhead and tactical units swarmed my driveway. Someone had called in a federal tip claiming my grandfather's barn was a meth lab. SWAT rolled in boots in the mud, red and blue strobes cutting the dawn. Detective Sarah Jenkins, the raid commander, looked like she wished she'd had coffee before this mess. She stepped over bales of hay and said, quiet and embarrassed, "We have to investigate." There was nothing, of course, only the smell of hay and oil. But the footage of the raid went viral. By noon, my face was on every screen as the suspected criminal. My ex-wife, scared and embarrassed, filed an emergency custody motion. That week felt like drowning. But just when the air was thinnest, Widow Jenkins, Arthur's widow, came to my porch with a dusty cardboard box cradled like relics. Inside were the original unredacted neighborhood planning minutes from 1968, proof that my grandfather had explicitly prevented any permanent transfer of the clubhouse land. Clara filed a quiet title action the next day. Caleb's brother Dexter, a tech-savvy forensic guy, started tracing anonymous emails and fake social profiles. Their digital breadcrumbs led back to a PR firm paid by the HOA's defense fund. The audit showed more than $340,000 missing from community funds and a hidden $285,000 consulting kickback slated for Eleanor's law firm. The smell of it was rotten fraud theft and a plan to profit from kicking a family off its land. We didn't just leak the findings, we set a stage. At the emergency town hall meeting, hundreds jammed into the community center, cameras buzzing. Eleanor sat rigid at the head table, whispering to lawyers, unaware that the projector behind her would do the talking. I walked up, clicked to life, the clips Tyler cutting the lock, the audio of board members laughing about kickbacks, time-stamped bank transfers. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I watched the room go silent like a held breath released. Then FBI agent David Brooks stood up from the back badge under the fluorescent lights and said the words that made the whole thing feel real. A federal grand jury had authorized indictments for wire fraud, civil rights violations, and racketeering. Eleanor's face went the color of old paper. Her empire cracked and fell in slow motion. The sound when she was led away in cuffs, that mix of crying, shouting, and long-release relief, is one I won't forget. Justice is a messy thing, and sometimes it comes with a standing ovation. 3 years later, Oak Creek Crossing breathes easier. The developers paid a multi-million-dollar settlement and left the state. Eleanor sits in federal prison, stripped of her license and buried in restitution. The ranch. It didn't just survive, it grew. We expanded, started an agricultural scholarship for local kids, opened our gates to veterans needing work and meaning. The HOA now leases the clubhouse from me for $1 a year, a constant quiet reminder about who owns what and why. I sit on that same porch most evenings watching the sun sink behind the peaks, listening to Maya and Leo argue about something trivial and perfect. There's satisfaction, yeah, a kind of vindictive sweetness. But there's also a lingering question that won't leave me. In a system where money and power can manufacture ruin for the little guy, does the law protect the innocent, or does justice only show up for the stubborn, the loud, and the lucky enough to drag it into the light? That's not a lecture. It's a question I learned by living through mud courtrooms and people's worst impulses. So I'll leave you with this: when money decides who wins, sometimes the only defense is community persistence and a willingness to fight quietly, smartly, and with a file folder full of inconvenient truth. What would you do if your town turned on you? Have you ever seen the system used to bully someone out of their life? Tell me. Share a story. Tell me where the line between law and justice lives. And let's talk about whether the system needs fixing or whether we need to learn to fix it with our own two hands.